Hello, you're welcome back. You must have seen the video on the cutting of the skirt before getting here. So this is our front skirt, and we have the front piece of our skirt. We have the lining here and the band. So now let's work on the front piece. Remember that this is the front and it's on fold. So the first thing I'll be doing now is to mark my darts and to sew it in. So our dart was at 4.5 inches. So I'll just mark 4.5 inches this way. So, and I'll take the length of my dart. Remember that the length of my dart was, you can take between 4 to 5 inches. So I'll just mark 4.5 inches because there's an additional ½ inch sewing allowance here. So let's mark 4.5 inches. I want to be sure I have a straight line this way. So I'm marking the 4.5 inches here. So just so that I won't need to start measuring again on the other side, I will notch my the two sides of my front at the same time. I'm cutting just a tiny notch through it. So now I'll hold here. This is the wrong side of the fabric, this is the right side. So I want to make my dart now. So I'm going to hold here, making sure that the waist of my skirt is straight. You don't want to sew it this way because then your darts won't be straight. So make sure this top edge is straight and you hold this way. So I'm going to sew up until this point I marked. That's my 4.5 inches. So remember our darts will be ½ inch wide. So because we are taking ½ inch on both sides, that will make a 1 inch dart in total for one side of the front. So I'll just do the same on the other side and pick up my lining and mark it just like this as well. So here's my dart. So I'll just do the same thing on this other side as well and on the lining. I'm done working with the main piece of my skirt. I'm going to do the same thing on this lining. I'm creating my dart, notch 4.5 inches, and now I'll just sew in ½ inch darts that will be 4.5 inches long. Next, I want to fix my band to the front piece of my skirt. So what you're going to do is to first notch the midpoint of your band. You notch the middle. This notch is just an indicator so that you can place it against the center of your front piece. And if there is any excess or difference in size, it won't affect what you're making. So right now, I'm just going to sew this, place my notch against each other, the main piece, the band of my skirt. Then I'm going to sew by 1/2 inch all the way through my front waistline. So make sure your band and the edge of your band and the edge of your waistline, the waistline of your skirt, align with each other, and you're just sewing it by 1/2 inch. So you have something like this. So now we want to turn our band. We don't want here showing this seam, so we don't want any rough edge. So what you're going to do is to place your lining on the band. That you're going to sandwich the band between the lining and the main cloth. Make sure the right side of your lining is facing the right side of your clothes. So you're just going to do this and make sure the darts are well aligned with each other. That you have your lining dart here at the same place. You also have your main fabric dart. So you're just going to sew that in by 1/2 inch. The same place you initially sew the main piece on. So attach your lining equally. So we have this waistband and the main skirt piece, such that when you open it up, you have this. So your dart is facing inward. The wrong side of your two fabrics are facing each other. So now we're going to work on the hem this way. So remember, this is shorter than this for a reason. Now we want to join these two together from the wrong side. So you're going to turn this all the way around, just the same place you sew here. So you're just going to go down and sew the same 1/2 inch at the edge of your skirt. So once this is done, you can turn your skirt through the sides and you have a nice looking skirt this way. So the next thing you need to do is to iron in your folding here, that's at the hem of your skirt. And we'll move on to work with the back now. So now this is the back, one of the back pieces we have. This is the hem, remember our slit, and this is the waistline. This is the zip part, the zip allowance of our skirt. So what I'm going to do now is to measure out my darts and take it just the way I did for the front. But for the front piece, because we didn't have any zip allowance, we made use of 4.5. So because of the extra 1 inch zip allowance here, we're going to mark 5.5. So I'll do this same thing on both sides of my skirt and sew in my darts. So I'm just notching the main piece alongside the lining, so I can just make my darts right away. So I'll make the same 4.5 inches long darts that we did for the front. So I'm measuring my 4.5 inches here. So once you fold it with the top well arranged, be sure that this line will be straight. But if you do this, you won't have a straight line. So there's no need measuring the line all over again at the lower end. Once the top is straight, you have your straight dart. So I'll pick up my lining and sew it in. Sew in my dart on the lining. So make sure that your dart is facing the wrong side of your clothes. That's the part where you sew in for darts, is facing the wrong side of your fabric. So you may just have to place your clothes on the table to be sure you're doing the right thing. So 4.5. So now I'm done with the lining and the main skirt piece on one side. So go ahead and do the same thing on the other side of the back piece. Okay, with all my darts done, right now I want to work on the skirt band for the back. So the first thing you'll be doing is to, remember we added a soft paper stay. We stick the soft paper stay on the wrong side of our band. So the first thing is to turn your band all around and sew in this edge. That's the part where we'll put at our zip allowance. That's at the zip allowance part of our skirt. So you can just sew by 1/4 of an inch, thereabouts. So once you're done with that, you turn it back. You have this. So you do this for the both bands. Now the next thing we'll be doing is to take the waist of our skirt and fix our band on it. So we're going to do this Just place this and leave about the same inch you use in turning up your band, like 1/4 inch. Just leave it at the edge. That's the zip allowance part of your skirt. Then you sew here in by 1/2 inch. So once that is done, you're going to use your lining to turn this edge. So just the same way we did at first. Place, this is the zip allowance part of our lining. Place it on, sandwich your band between the main fabric and your lining. Make sure the right side of your lining aligns with is facing the right side of your fabric with the band in between. And we'll sew back 1/2 inch again. So you can do this at once, but I mean you can place it this way and just sew once, but I wanted you to get all the steps involved properly. So make sure you're not taking more than the 1/2 inch allowance. That's because when we're cutting, that was what we added. So in fact, all the time, you sew your sewing allowance back in so that you can have accurate measurements. So we have this. When you open this up, your band is between the lining and the cloth. So before you turn it, go to the edge of your fabric. Remember, the lining is shorter than the main cloth, but we're going to sew this in by 1/2 inch. So pull your lining downward. Don't worry about the length being unequal yet. So you're going to sew the hem like we did for the front by 1/2 inch. So still before you turn your lining, this is the zip allowance part of our skirt. So you're just going to sew here in by 1/4 inch. Remember, we left a little space when we're fixing our band. So from the edge of our, without sewing in the band, so just pull the band inward and sew in that 1/4 inch that you left when fixing the band. So here's what you can do to these stickers that come with clothes if you don't have iron, because you can place an iron here, iron it and pull it out, or you pour in your machine oil. So it does not just remove it, it makes sewing through it easier. So make sure your slits aligns with each other. In fact, that's one of the ways you know that you've placed your fabric and lining properly. So just raise your machine foot and make a sharp turn this way. Then you continue sewing. So when you get to this edge again, put in your needle, raise your machine foot, and you continue sewing. So then again, I have another sticker here. Just work this through it and pull it out. So once you're done, always remember to backstitch at the beginning and at the end of your seam. So this sharp edge here, you're going to place tiny notches close to it so that it can relax properly. That's the sharp edge here. That's what you do, tiny notches, and you trim this other edge out a little bit. So now this is the side of our skirt, and you can turn your skirt this way. So right now I'll just give this a good press, and we'll go through this process all over for the other side of our back piece. So this is what it looks like. This is where we are going to fit our zip into. So now this is our two back piece, all well treated and well pressed. This is the slit, this part is our zip allowance. So what we're going to do now is to join the two sides below our zip. Remember in the previous video how we fixed our zip? So we'll be doing exactly the same thing for this skirt, just that in this case you can use a shorter zip, but then since we won't be putting any hook here, if you make use of this very small zip, skirt zip, it may not zip down properly for you, except if you're very tiny. Probably you are just not big as such. So, but then we'll make use of this long zip. We won't make use of all the length though. You can just, from your band, measure like, let's see, from the top of your band, you can take like 9 inches and that will be fine. Or from 8 inches, that will be fine. So I'm just marking 9 inches here. So from this 9 inches, I'm going to sew 1 inch. I'm going to sew back my zip allowance 1 inch. 1 inch. Remember, we folded in 1/4 of an inch here, so I won't even be folding 1 inch. I'll be folding like 3/4 of an inch. That's what's left of our zip allowance. So we sew it in till we get to this part of the slit. That's the top edge of the slit, and then we'll stop. So let's do this. if you're practicing this for the very first time, it's advisable to make use of the allowances on your side. You can make use of 1.5 inch or even 2 inches, so you can leave room for correction if you make any mistake. So just by our slit here, you stop sewing your zip allowance. And now let's fix our thread, our zip rather, then we'll work on the slit. So now just open this up. We're going to work on this side first. So just make sure we're going to cut the upper part of our zip out, but make sure your zip goes below the joining here. So maybe like by 2 inches will be fine. So you place the right side of your zip against the right side of your fabric here. So this is the joining we made, our zip allowance, and I'll just place my zip this way. So I'll sew here in by 3/4 inch or 1 inch if you don't want to mind the 1/4 inch you took in earlier on to sew this edge. So you want to be sure you are sewing close to the teeth and still not climbing on the teeth. So I made a little blunder here. Let's rip this. So So now we'll work on the other part of our back. I want to fix the zip. So it will be helpful if you first pin your zip down. Make sure the allowance you have here is equal to the allowance you have on this side. So I'll just go ahead and start sewing, not from the top this time, but from the bottom edge. So you can remove your pin as you sew. So now we have our zip fixed. See how the bands align with each other. So now I'm just going to zip this down and trim off this edge. I'll still leave about 1 inch above my band so that I can fold it in. So this is what you do to this edge. Fold it in this way and turn in your zip allowance. Then you top stitch on this part of your band. Now we want to work on the lower part of our zip allowance, which houses the slit. So we have these two sides. What you're going to do is turn one on the other. Then we're going to top stitch on this. So we'll give this a good press. You can then use a hemming glue to hem here, or you just use your needle and thread to make tiny hems here. So this is one way to make a slit. So I'm going to turn my machine all around. So it'll be nice of you to first press your slit in before even ironing. So we'll have this. So this is what a slit looks like here. So you can then press here in, or you can use a hemming glue. You can just press it properly. It will stay this way. So now I'm going to give this a good press, and we'll move to joining our front and back piece. We're almost done with this. Now we're ready to join our skirt. This is the back, and I'll just place the front on it, the right side facing each other, and I'll go ahead and pin from my band to the hem all around. So here you take 34 inches and mark. That's 34 inches divided by 4, 8.5. You mark and come down to your hip line here. That's 9 inches. Then you mark your hip circumference divided by 4. That's 44 divided by 4. That's 11 here. You connect your dots, and then you follow through with this allowance. Make the same allowance all through to the hem. So we'll go ahead and sew this in. Then we'll get back to making the markings on the other side. So now I've sewn that side in. I'll just take my measurement towards this side now so I can mark the line I'll sew this time. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to be starting my measurement here this time, and that will mean dividing my bust circumference into my waist circumference into 2, not 4 again, because we're starting from one edge onto the other. So when we divide 34 into 2, we have 17 inches. So I'll mark that 17 inches. Once again, I'll come down to my hip line 9 inches, and I'll mark my hip. That's 44. When you divide 44 into 2, this time you have 22. So I'll mark 22 here and connect my line. So I'll follow through with the same allowance onto the hem line. Just follow the curve you initially created with your skirt, and that's what you're going to be sewing in. Before you start taking all this mark, make sure you have properly pinned your skirt. Now I've joined my 2 sides together, and now I'm just going to trim the edges so I have even allowances all through, and I'll use my overlocker to overlock here. But once again, you can turn your seam in for a neat finishing. Turn one edge in this way and turn the other in. Then you sew by about 1/4 of an inch all the way down, so that way you can achieve a neat finishing even without an overlocker. Okay, so this is what we have: our pencil skirt, the back and the front. And with this, we have come to the end of this class. I hope you get to cut and sew yours, and I would like to assess it once you're through with it. Thank you very much.